No one's
to
saying
result
they are. No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic. We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were
They're not.
animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
Senator, welcome to the program. It's an honor to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So, President Trump paying for the renovations at the White House. Good news?
You know, I'm not losing a lot of sleep over it. I would say when I rank my top 10 worries for the country each night, the ballroom construction's not on the list.
Okay. Hillary Clinton, does she have any grounds to actually criticize this, given her history at the White House?
You know, the Clintons are the gift that keeps on giving. There is no end to Clinton stories, Clinton scandals, and ridiculous statements from them. So I'm happy to take a chuckle and listen to anything about the Clintons anytime I have a little extra time.
All right. All right. Someone that you're not happy to listen to when he testifies is John Brennan. I'm sure that you're very happy that the House referred CIA Director John Brennan to the DOJ for criminal prosecution over false statements about the Steele dossier, false statements to Congress. So, I mean, I think some of those false statements were to you, Senator, if I am recalling this correctly.
You know, I have a general sort of opposition to how much power we've given the intelligence agencies to spy on Americans in particular and to spy indiscriminately. I think this spying power was used on President Trump in 2016, the FISA warrants. These are Foreign Intelligence Service warrants that are basically not consistent with the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. It's a much lower standard. They say association with a foreign government. So some of the people who worked in his campaign, they alleged were associated with the foreign governments. They just got wide and expansive powers. So I'm against the power in just in general of how much power to spy on Americans, but more specifically, the individual characters like Brennan, Clapper, Bolton, others are examples of the people who get attracted to this kind of power, like moths to flame. They come, and the weakness of humans to submit or to succumb to the allure of power is evident by people like Brennan, people like Clapper, who do lie, who do spy on Americans, who do take that power and abuse it. And really, one of the most egregious things is that they're still allowed to be talking heads on television. So both Clapper, Brennan, and a whole host of others signed a statement saying that that Hunter Biden's laptop was basically a Russian hoax. And yet they still are allowed in polite society. People think they should have access to our nation's secrets. The Democrats would bring them back into power if they were to win the White House again. That is particularly galling. So I think Brennan's getting his just desserts. I spoke for 13 hours. My first filibuster in the Senate in 2013 was against John Brennan. So I have no love lost for the guy.
So it does seem wild that the people who are being indicted right now, James Comey, for instance, Letitia James, these people are law enforcement. That James Clapper, John Brennan, these are the people that were the most trusted with America's secrets and the implementation of law enforcement. They're at the very least being indicted for criminal activity, and that should send a little chill down all of our spines.
And I think it's just, but then there's also the problem of too much power being legislated or delegated to these people in general. So the biggest fight we've had in the last 10 years was over the FISA database. They suck up all this information. Now, foreigners don't have constitutional rights in other countries, so I don't really care what information we get. But if they talk to an American, my information in that database should get Fourth Amendment protection. So we put forward a warrant requirement that if the government want to search for an American in the FISA court documents that have been gobbled up from all around the world, they would have to have a warrant. They would have to have a Fourth Amendment warrant. They can't just search it. Right now, they can pretty much search and do what they want for all kinds of crimes not related to terrorism, potential domestic crimes, or political enemies. So we had this vote, and I don't know if you remember this, it was about 3 or 4 years ago. Mike Johnson was the deciding vote, and he voted against the warrant requirement. It failed on a 212 to 212 vote. And so it's, I think, ironic because sometimes people criticize me for not being a big enough or 100% supporter of everything the president wants. But there's nobody in Congress that is more for getting rid of the abuse of power that they used to go after Donald Trump. And that was the FISA court, this secret court, foreign intelligence court that went after Donald Trump. They abused him. People like Brenner and Clapper were the ones directing it. But take that power away, will it never happen again? Mike Johnson, who is now the president's friend, was the guy who voted against the reform. He killed the reform in the House, 212 to 212. And so these are the battles we should be having instead of the petty battles where people say, oh, Rand Paul doesn't support the president enough. No one supports reforming the intelligence community and these abusive powers of John Brennan more than me. It's about any president. We shouldn't let the American government spy on Americans.
Yes, it sounds like we apologize. There's a small glitch. Are you hearing that too, Klein? Yeah. Anyway, whatever. Whenever we talk about the Communist Party of China, whenever we talk about government spying, there's always some type of glitch in the live stream. Whatever. We hear you loud and clear, Senator. We've also read the stories that there's senators that were being spied on in Operation Arctic Frost, and that your colleagues were having their data being scooped up by the FBI just for investigating this. This is very Orwellian stuff. Can you give us an update on that, Senator?
Yeah, the irony is that a couple of the senators, I won't mention any names, but Lindsey Graham have been ones who have been in favor of this spying. They've been in favor of indiscriminate spying, and he has always voted against any restrictions on spying on Americans. And now it turns out he became the victim of a spying campaign directed by the Biden people. So I wrote an op-ed on this that was published about a week ago, and I looked at the Carpenter case. The Carpenter case was decided by the Supreme Court saying that your location data, where you are on your phone, like right now, if your location service is on, people can snoop, they can call the phone company and find out exactly where you are every moment of every day. Well, the Supreme Court ruled that that information actually deserves Fourth Amendment protections. So there's two different ways you can get information. One is a subpoena, like a grand jury subpoena or an administrative subpoena. It requires just relevance to an investigation. They can get anything they want. The court said, well, your corporate business returns or business accounts isn't really yours anymore. You keep it at the bank. You don't have a personal interest in that. But the court in Carpenter said your geolocation does. This is a long way of getting back to the spying on Lindsey Graham and the others, is they looked at their geolocation with a subpoena from a grand jury. This is Jake Smith. I think it was an abuse of power, but I also think it was illegal under the Constitution. So I've encouraged them to sue. Now, I think they should sue the phone company because I think the phone company ought to be liable for not protecting their privacy. This is an open-ended question, but I think they all should sue, and there are rumblings that some of them might sue. It's harder to sue the government, but I think what Jack Smith did under this was an abuse of power, but I think unconstitutional also. And it needs to be pursued, or this kind of nefarious spying on senators and congressmen will happen again.
I mean, Senator, isn't this like what Nixon was impeached for, right? Like Nixon had to leave office because he's spying on political opposition. Wasn't this like the biggest scandal, so-called, in American history?
Unfortunately, the bar has gotten so low that, I mean, government's expected to do bad things and nobody blinks an eye anymore. And then the other side is told, oh, well, it was just going after Trump and they hate Trump so much that they really see beyond the abuses. Now, on the reform of FISA, though, we did get beyond politics. That was a mixture of libertarian Republicans and civil libertarian left-leaning Democrats who came together, and we almost had it. We were one vote shy until the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, came forward and voted to keep or not to have a warrant for a search of FISA, to let them to continue to search the FISA database willy-nilly and potentially search it for political opponents. And I think that's what they did to Donald Trump in 2016.
You know, some people watching this are going to say, like, why do Republicans vote with the deep state? And there have been many members of Congress that have been on the show, some from your region of the world, Tennessee. Tim Burchett's a good example of this, who've said, like, the reason they vote that way is because they're compromised. And that someone from the deep state either shows them a photo they don't want out, or there's something like that explains some level of leverage that they have over them. and they're able to maintain power and control in that manner. Do you agree with that? Do you see any of that, Senator?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much. Could that be happening? Maybe, but I think most of it is philosophic. So, for example, I know Lindsey well and actually like him personally, but don't agree with a lot of the policies. He would simply argue that we got to be fast, we got to go after terrorism, and we got to be able to, maybe some Americans are going to get caught up in this thing, but we got to have expansive power to protect the country and that we need it for national defense. I don't know if his opinion will change now that he's been scooped up in the intelligence world. But I've always said you can have both. For example, if you want to spy on everybody in Libya, I don't care, frankly. That's foreign relations, foreign affairs. It may not be good for relations with that country if they know you're spying on every phone call, but there is no constitutional protection for Libyans in Libya. There is for Americans in America, and we should be very, very cautious not to let the government snoop on all of our personal phone calls, our metadata, our geolocation. But as far as foreigners, you can. So I think you can spy on people outside the country or attacks coming from within. I think if you have people in the country who have gotten here and you think they're plotting against the country, it's not that hard to actually get warrants. Most time judges do grant warrants, but you have to present some evidence. And I think you could still do that. But what happens now is the FISA database is so huge, they say, well, I think Mr. Jones is a drug dealer. I don't have any proof, but why don't I search the FISA database, find out where he is all the time, then start investigating him. Then in backdoor, I get information that he's a drug dealer or he's committing tax fraud. And you say, well, those are bad people. We're going after bad people. The problem is we have the Fourth Amendment for both good and bad people. The Fourth Amendment says the government has to present probable cause. There's a standard. And the FISA court doesn't have that standard. Its standard is they can collect anything they want as long as it has some association of a person with a foreign government. But it could be, I talked to a reporter in Washington who also is stationed in the Middle East some of the time, who talks to an informant from Hamas. Well, now I'm 2 hops away from Hamas, even though I've never ever talked to anybody in Hamas. Does that give the government the right to spy on my phone calls because I talked to a legitimate reporter who happens to talk to a contact in the Middle East who happens to be a terrorist? And so we can't allow that, and we have to be much more strict on defending civil liberties. But I'm hoping this new and latest spying scandal will motivate some people who haven't been on our side, like Senator Graham, who maybe he will be more motivated to take a look at the abuse of FISA and the abuse of these spying powers.
Senator, it has been weaponized. And I don't want to belabor the point here. I know I've asked 3 questions about this, but before we switch topics quickly, the only phone that it seems like they couldn't spy on was the January 6th pipe bomber. Have you ever found that strange?
We never heard any more about it. You would think in our era, with all the cameras out there, somebody would have seen him, or I guess they did have some pictures of him.
He was on the phone, Senator. He was sitting there on the phone right next to the Capitol. They scooped him.
You would think if he's on phone and with a warrant, you could find out geolocation probably of who was standing in that position. There probably were 4 or 5 phones. I mean, how hard would it be to find the person who was on that phone? I would think you would be able to do that with geolocation data, with a warrant, of course. But nothing ever happened to that. So I don't know.
Nothing ever happens. Yes, that's right. Nothing ever happens. Something happened with you and Dr. Fauci is a remarkable clip that we've played probably hundreds of times on this program. You're the only senator in history to have gotten Dr. Fauci to shake. I've seen this guy on TV 100,000 times. I've seen him tell bald-faced lies to the American public. I've seen him ask for double and triple masking. I've seen him say some of the most, batshit crazy things I've ever heard anyone say on television, and he never shakes, except for here in this exchange with you, where you're asking about gain of function. And you can see his hand physically quivering. You can see Dr. Fauci physically shaking. That's a tell. That's an autonomic nervous system tell. You're a doctor. And these are like things that, there it is, pretty remarkable. You've referred Dr. Fauci for criminal prosecution to the DOJ. I'd just love to get your overall assessment. 1, of this remarkable clip. Why is he shaking? And then 2, what's going to happen to Dr. Fauci?
Well, the exchange where he does lie to Congress is over gain of function. This is where you take 2 different viruses, combine them or combine the genetics for them, and you create a new virus that doesn't exist in nature that increases its transmissibility to people, or its infectiousness, or its lethality to people. And he's saying, no, we never funded this in Wuhan. They did fund it, and it was gain of function. We now have private emails that were discovered through FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, that show that he knew that he had done this. And so the reason I think he's shaking is he's concerned because he's been caught in a lie. And we're not done. I referred him twice for criminal prosecution in the Biden administration. I've referred him once for criminal prosecution to the Trump DOJ. We have worked with the Trump administration and finally gotten every document, just about every document you can imagine. We've been going through these for months now. We found evidence that he destroyed federal records and he directed others to destroy federal records. These are separate crimes. Now, there is a question whether or not his pardon will cover that, and we've asked him to come and testify. And people say, well, why do you ask him? Why don't you make him? Because the way the process works is you ask people first, and if they will testify, then you don't have to subpoena them. If you do have to go to a subpoena, then there may well be a court challenge, and we have another battle that we have to fight as well. So right now we have asked him for information about his conversations and his use of non-governmental means of communication to do federal work. And we're going to look at what he gives to us in the next week or two. We're going to see if he will voluntarily come in and testify. But if he doesn't, we will subpoena him. So our hope is that we get a voluntary appearance. But at the very least, he's going to have to answer our questions concerning gain of function, but also destruction of records. If you'll recall, when they brought in one of his colleagues, a David Morenz, who worked with him at the NIH, Fauci acted like, oh, never knew him, hardly ever saw him. We have dozens and dozens of emails over years between the two. And Morenz was the one who said, oh, yeah, we had this FOIA lady over there who taught us how to avoid searches and requests. So what they do is they'd take, like, there was a virologist by the name of Christian Anderson who got an $8 million grant from Fauci after he supported Fauci's request to write an article saying that this couldn't have come from a lab, it had to come from nature. What they did with Anderson's name is it had a bunch of S's in it. They changed the S's into $signs so they wouldn't show up on a FOIA search. What I think is ironic about it is he was out there looking for money and shilling for money all the time up here. So they changed the S's in his name to $sign to avoid FOIA searches. There are a lot of shenanigans going on. Things that really, you talk about Watergate or you talk about scandals, they all pale. The COVID cover-up, I wrote a whole book on this, Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up, because there's never been a cover-up more thoroughly documented, because we got most of their conversations, we got most of their emails, and we've seen them behind the scenes saying, oh my goodness, I'm pretty certain this looks like it was manipulated in a lab and came from a lab and not nature. Almost simultaneously, they're saying in public, no way, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist if you think it came from a lab. So publicly saying one thing and privately the other, probably so remarkable to ever catch somebody in such a cover-up.
I know that you have to run, Senator, but just to put an end cap on this as a follow-up, since you literally wrote the book on it and have asked the best questions on it, what was Dr. Fauci trying to cover up? Like, was he trying to cover up the EcoHealth Alliance funding of this research? Was he trying to cover up? Do you believe that he has culpability in actually releasing this virus? Do you believe that this was meant to rig the election and to destroy the MAGA rallies and Trump's economic victories in 2020? Do you believe this was a bioweapon?
I probably wouldn't go that far. What I would say is that he was trying to protect the business of science. So science, we want to think that the scientists that work in cancer research want to cure cancer and they should win the Nobel Prize and that they're noble people and honorable people. But there's also the business of science, and it's run by billions and billions of dollars. Anthony Fauci was the head of the business of science ever since 9/11. After 9/11, we became more concerned with biological warfare, so we directed billions and billions of dollars into biological warfare research, ostensibly to defend against it. But there was a lot of things being experimented upon that actually could either be for defense or could be for offense, because many things are dual use. But he became in charge of all of that money. Now, if it became known that a virus that killed 15, 18 million people, which COVID did around the world, if it became known that he knew about it and didn't provide oversight and that there were safety lapses because this was done in an unsafe lab in China that doesn't have the same safety protocols, and that he approved it, then he would have culpability, and that the business of science might get less money. People might say, well, maybe we shouldn't put billions of dollars of research into creating viruses that don't exist in nature that might kill us all. That doubt and that problem is why he had to vehemently deny it, but he also didn't want to face culpability for those deaths, frankly. He shares some culpability. Now, I don't go so far as to say, oh, we tried to do it on purpose. He tried to kill people. No, I think it was an accident. I think the leak from the lab was not purposeful, but was accidental. But you still, if you preside over an accident that kills 18 million people and you're an air traffic controller and two planes run into each other and hundreds of people die, you're no longer the air traffic controller. One of the punishments is, and it doesn't mean you were necessarily an evil person, but you made a horrific error. Fauci made the largest error in modern medicine and in public health policy probably ever of someone. And for that, he deserves the rebuke of history, but he also deserves never to be in a position, nor should his lieutenants be in a position of managing any of our taxpayer money again, because they made such a profound mistake to fund dangerous research in Wuhan without adequate safety that led to the deaths of 18 million people.
A beautiful answer. I can tell that you've written the book on this, Senator, and also something that I think people need to internalize, which is that either through incompetence or malevolence, it really doesn't matter. There are tens of millions of people dead because of an experiment that went right or wrong. Either way, it just doesn't matter. The results are there, and they're totally and completely unacceptable and indefensible. And yeah, why is Fauci allowed in polite society? I don't know. Rand Paul is, though. Rand Paul is right here. He's got 6 million subscribers on X. You should be one of them. On a parting note, 1 to 10, how's RFK doing, Senator, if we're talking about the health establishment in the country?
9. I think he's doing great. I tell people that organized medicine needs a kick in the pants, and that there are many things that need to be reevaluated. Number one, on the vaccines, there's no benefit for the COVID vaccine for children. 0. No evidence, no experimental evidence, no scientific study, and there is evidence of harm. I think the risks of the COVID vaccine for children outweigh the benefits. There's also no reason, if the mom does not have hepatitis, to do hepatitis B vaccine at birth. These are two things that I know with certainty, and I will continue to fight. And I think we need to change, at the very least, those two things in the vaccine schedule. I'm not for saying we get rid of all the vaccines or anything like that. There are 2 vaccines we give children that don't need to be done, and I'm going to continue fighting that until we fix that problem.
Thank you, Senator. I know you have an ally with RFK Jr. At HHS, and that must be really comforting to you. Maybe for the first time in our lives, we have an ally in that fight. Thank you, Senator, so very much for your time, for your insight. Again, follow Rand Paul right here. Again, thank you, Senator. Godspeed.
Thank you.